In the past few months, I had been employed at a haunted house for the Halloween season. What sets this haunt apart is its location within an old abandoned movie theater back to the 1950s. Two known deaths occurred within this theater, one during its operational days, and the other being a scare actor who tragically suffered a heart attack in the men's restroom. The place is potentially influenced by residual hauntings from an old sanitarium across the street and unmarked graves upon which the property was constructed. It's worth noting that everyone who works there has had some form of paranormal experience, including myself. Now, I'd like to share my own encounters. On my very first day, which was spent helping to set things up before the season commenced, I was conversing with the tech manager, whom I'll refer to as James. It was just James and me, walking through the scenes. When we entered the theater scene, which is an old showroom preserved for the movie theater setting, an eerie sensation washed over me, and I felt as though I was being watched. At that moment, James commented, "This is one of the most spiritually active parts of the building." On another occasion, I found myself in the projector room with James and two other actors. We began to hear unexplained clicks and knocking, distinct from the usual sounds and knocks. My next eerie experience occurred during the opening week. I had gone to use the restroom. While I was in there, doing my business, I distinctly heard the toilet paper holder being manipulated in the stall adjacent to mine. I was alone in the bathroom, and I would have heard the door opening due to its loud creak. This, I later learned, is a rather common occurrence in the men's bathroom. However, the most terrifying experience I encountered happened during a night in the previously mentioned theater scene, alongside two other actors. The night had just begun, and I realized I had left a prop behind. One of my scene partners still needed makeup applied. I informed them that I would walk with him to the makeup room since it was located right next to the costume and prop room. Our scene leader, whom I'll call Ted, gave us the green light to go. However, upon returning alone to the theater, I noticed that Ted was absent. Since he also worked as a queue-line actor, I assumed he wouldn't be gone for too long. I despise being in that theater alone. It's an eerie and unsettling experience. Even when I don't sense danger, the ambiance is eerie. So, I sat in one of the theater seats and waited for the next group when I spotted a figure entering the room from the scene next door. I didn't merely see a figure. I heard the distinct sound of footsteps accompanying the apparition. Assuming it was my scene leader, I called out, "Hey, Ted." But there was no response. I repeated his name, but still, no one replied. I was entirely alone in the room. Ted actually returned about 10 minutes later, and this remains one of the most chilling experiences I've had. Throughout my time working there were numerous instances when I was running around, sweating off my makeup, and suddenly I'd become so cold that I'd start shivering and develop goosebumps. Keep in mind that the building had no AC or heating, which added to the overall eerie atmosphere. I'd like to share a story about a shadowy figure that has been a consistent presence in my life since I was younger. For context, I'm a believer in the paranormal and spirituality, but what has truly surprised me is the unwavering consistency of sightings and actions of this shadowy figure, even from the perspective of people who have no prior knowledge of it, either from me or anyone else. As a child, I was sitting with my brother in his bedroom, and the door provided a clear view of the entire hallway. This view allowed me to see both entrances to my parents' bedroom and the washroom, which were parallel to each other. I remember the sun was setting, and due to nearby forest fires, the entire hallway was bathed in a deep red color, which felt eerie but not particularly alarming. I didn't think much of it until I turned my head to look down the hallway. That's when I witnessed a clear image of a short, shadowy figure swiftly running from my parents' bedroom into the washroom. I was utterly terrified and couldn't believe what I had just seen. I quickly shared this experience with my brother and parents. Fast forward several years, and my aunt comes to visit, staying at our house for a couple of months. During her stay, she never mentioned anything about the shadowy figure. Years later, we began discussing scary stories, and she suddenly told me, "You know, your house has something." Remarkably, I hadn't disclosed anything about what I had seen, and my family members had remained silent on the matter. However, she described exactly what I had witnessed in the exact same locations, doing the exact same thing. A short, shadowy figure darting from my parents' bedroom into the washroom, mirroring my experience from years prior. Many more years passed, and I moved into a new house with a couple of roommates. One of my roommates is a deeply spiritual person, and I hadn't shared my earlier experiences with her. However, I did mention that I had felt a presence in the house when I first moved in. My unease was significant enough that I visited my local church to acquire rosaries, crosses, and sage to protect against positive energies and spirits. Initially, my roommate reassured me that there was nothing in the house when I first moved in. But on one particular night, she confirmed to me that something had changed. She explained that while she hadn't sensed anything before my arrival, she had now witnessed twice a tall, shadowy figure racing from my bedroom into the washroom. Needless to say, I was left speechless and terrified. Throughout my life, I've always felt as if I were being watched, or that I was never truly alone. This feeling never bothered me unless I dwelled on it extensively. I'm incredibly curious as to why these occurrences are happening. My roommate suggested that maybe this entity is following me around because it has unfinished business with me. I find myself wondering what that could mean and why spirits seem to attach themselves to specific individuals. I'd appreciate hearing your thoughts on this matter. I used to reside in the Philippines, and the house I lived in was constructed during the Japanese occupation of the Philippines in World War II. It featured two narrow walkways, one on the side and one at the back of the house. The point where these two walkways intersected was where my dog's enormous wooden doghouse was located. I emphasize huge because it was spacious enough for a 12-year-old like me to comfortably go inside and even sleep in. One evening, my uncle asked me to go and feed our dog, Casper. Naturally, I agreed right away because I also wanted to spend some quality time with my beloved pet. Casper was usually a cheerful and playful dog, always dashing around and delighted to see any family member. However, that particular night was different. As I made my way towards Casper's doghouse, I realized that I didn't hear the usual barking or the sound of him scurrying about. I thought perhaps he was in the back walkway, so I proceeded towards the doghouse. It was around 8 o'clock at night, and I paused halfway there when I noticed that Casper was inside the doghouse. This was unusual because he typically raced towards me when he saw me. I became concerned, thinking that something might be wrong with him, such as illness or injury. I quickened my pace to reach him. Upon reaching the doghouse, Casper appeared physically fine. I placed his food beside him and replenished his water bowl. Yet, he displayed no reaction whatsoever. Casper was just fixated on the back hallway. My curiosity got the better of me, so I followed his gaze. What I saw still sends shivers down my spine when I recall that day. I saw a man standing there, staring at me with an expressionless face. He was wearing a military uniform of some kind and held a rifle. I wasn't a gun expert, so I couldn't identify the exact type, but I noticed a bayonet affixed to the tip of the rifle, stained with blood. At that moment, I was paralyzed with fear. I remember thinking, this is it. Someone is here, and he's going to harm me. I can't quite recall what made me shift my gaze away from the bayonet, but when I did, the first thing that struck me was that the man was missing half of his face. Witnessing this partial, eerie visage jolted me out of my frozen state, and I sprinted away. I didn't dare look back to check if he was pursuing me. In my frantic escape, I even tackled my uncle, who was coming to check on me. I wept uncontrollably when I realized I was on top of him. My uncle took me inside, where I eventually fell asleep after my crying fit. The following morning, my uncle spoke to me about the experience, and I recounted everything to him. He appeared genuinely concerned and revealed that I wasn't the only one in the house to have such encounters. Later on, I learned that the uniform the man was wearing was the standard Japanese military attire during World War II.